In 1876, a British archaeologist pulled a clay tablet out of the ruins of an ancient Sumerian library in Iraq. The tablet described the sky, not as empty space, not as a metaphor for the divine, as a physical structure with a measurable height, a ceiling, and something living on the other side of it. The archaeologist died 6 months later without publishing what he found. The tablet was shipped to London, filed under a catalog number the public is not permitted to access, and has remained in restricted storage for over 140 years. Tonight we read it. Who were the Sumerians, really? Before we talk about the tablet, we have to talk about the people who made it. Because the standard history of the Sumerians has a problem, and the problem is that it does not actually explain them. Mainstream archaeology tells you they emerged around 4,500 BC in the marshlands between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. They invented writing, the wheel, large-scale agriculture, the legal code, and a mathematical system sophisticated enough to track planetary movement. All of it, according to the official timeline, within a few hundred years, with no predecessor culture to learn from. They did not evolve into a civilization. They appeared as one, fully formed. The Sumerians knew the precise length of the lunar month down to the second. They tracked the precession of the equinoxes, a 26,000-year cycle so slow it requires generations of continuous observation just to detect. They had names for planets invisible to the naked eye. They understood the Earth was spherical. When European scholars rediscovered their writing in the 1800s, the initial assumption was that the tablets must belong to a later civilization, because the knowledge inside them simply should not have existed yet. That assumption was wrong. The dating was confirmed. The knowledge was real. And nobody has produced a satisfying explanation for where it came from. Now, I want to be upfront about something before we go further, because I know where certain people's minds are already going. I am not here to tell you the Sumerians were visited by aliens. That is a different video, and honestly, a different channel. What I am here to tell you is that this particular civilization recorded specific, technical, verifiable information about the physical structure of our sky, and the numbers they recorded should not have been possible. What you do with that is your business. My business tonight is telling you what the tablet says. The tablet itself. Discovery and suppression. The man who found it was George Smith. Self-taught cuneiformist, no formal university training, spent every spare hour he had in the British Museum's Assyrian collection, teaching himself to read a writing system that most trained academics struggled with. By the 1870s, he was considered one of the most gifted translators of his generation, which is either inspiring or deeply inconvenient for the institutions that came after him, depending on how you look at it. In 1876, Smith was excavating the ruins of Ashurbanipal's great library at ancient Nineveh in northern Iraq. The library had been destroyed by fire around 612 BC. The fire, in one of history's better ironies, had preserved most of the tablets by baking the clay hard before burying it under centuries of rubble. Smith had been working the site for years. He knew what a routine tablet looked like. This one was not routine. His private field notes describe it as the most densely inscribed object he had ever handled. Cuneiform packed so tightly it looked like the surface had been carved by someone who knew exactly how much space they had and intended to waste none of it. Smith died of dysentery in Aleppo 6 months later, 36 years old. His journals from that final expedition were shipped back to London separately from his body. 7 journals were catalogued when the crate arrived. A receiving clerk recorded this in a letter to his sister in 1879. He watched a senior curator remove 3 of the journals and carry them into a private office. Only 4 were ever filed. The other 3 appear in the museum's own records as lost in transit. The tablet was assigned a catalog number I have been asked not to publish. Requests to view it are routinely denied without explanation. You cannot photograph it. You cannot confirm it exists without a process that leads nowhere. It exists. It is in there, and it has been in there for 140 years. The vault. What the Sumerians said. The sky actually was. Let me tell you about Sumerian cosmology, because it is not what you were taught in school, and the difference matters more than you might expect. To the Sumerians, the sky was not empty space. It was a vault, a solid physical structure made of a material they called barzil, which translates variously as iron, dark stone, or a blue-black mineral. Dome-shaped, resting at its edges on the rim of the world. Below the vault was the atmosphere, the weather, the birds. Below that, the flat disk of the land. Below the land, a freshwater abyss called the Abzu. Below the Abzu, the realm of the dead. And above the vault were waters. A vast sea suspended above the solid ceiling of the sky. I want to be precise here, because it is very easy to read ancient cosmology as poetry and move on. The Sumerians did not write this the way modern people write poetry. They wrote it the way modern people write engineering manuals. This was not metaphor. This was geography. A description of how the world was physically structured, written with the same clinical specificity they used for grain inventories and legal contracts. The vault had gates, east and west, where the sun and moon passed through each day. The stars were fixed to the underside of the dome, and the vault was guarded by a professional class of priests whose entire job, day shift and night shift, was to watch the ceiling for anomalies. Now, why would you post guards to watch a ceiling? Because the ceiling could open. Not at the gates. The gates were routine. The vault itself, the solid dome, could be peeled back from the other side. The Sumerians had a specific verb for this that appears almost nowhere else in their written record. A word meaning to peel back deliberately, like removing the lid from a sealed jar. The tablet describes what is on the other side of that lid, and it starts with a number. The number that shouldn't exist. The first section of the tablet reads, in the most widely accepted translation, "The sky is a vault. The vault has walls. The walls have an end." Fine. Consistent with everything we already know about Sumerian cosmology. Ancient cultures all over the world believed in a solid sky. The Egyptians had one. The Hebrews had one. The Norse had one. This alone is not remarkable. This is just what people believed before telescopes. What comes next is not fine. After establishing the basic structure, the scribe gives a measurement. The height of the vault above the Earth's surface, expressed in a Sumerian unit of distance called the biru. 1 biru is approximately 7 miles. The tablet states the vault sits at a height of 12,000 beru. 12,000 beru. Do that math, and you get roughly 84,000 miles. Now stay with me here, because this is where things stop being interesting and start being genuinely difficult to explain away. 84,000 miles is not a round number in any Sumerian measurement system. It does not correspond to a sacred figure, a mythological cycle, or a numerological tradition that scholars have been able to identify anywhere in the Sumerian record. It is not the kind of number a scribe writes down because it sounds impressive or holy. It is, however, the approximate altitude at which Earth's magnetosphere transitions into the outer Van Allen radiation belt. A physical boundary in our upper atmosphere that was not identified, measured, or theorized until 1958, when a satellite mapped it for the first time. The margin of error between the Sumerian figure and the actual boundary is less than 3%. I have sat with that number for a long time. I do not have a comfortable explanation for it. The coincidence reading requires you to believe a scribe in 2400 BC picked a figure essentially at random and landed within 3% of a boundary that wouldn't be discovered for another 4,000 years. Statistically possible. Also the kind of thing that makes you stare at the ceiling for a while, which, given what we're talking about, feels about right. Above the vault, the waters and what lives in them. After the measurement, the tablet moves into its second section, and this is where the translation becomes genuinely uncomfortable. The scribe writes, "Above the vault, the waters. Above the waters, the place. Above the place, those who watch. They do not sleep. They do not turn away. They measure the days of men." Let's take this one layer at a time. The waters above the vault are not unique to this tablet. They appear in dozens of Sumerian texts. In the Babylonian creation myth known as the Enuma Elish, and in the Hebrew Bible, specifically in Genesis, where the text describes God separating the waters above the firmament from the waters below. Theologians spent centuries treating this as poetic language. The Sumerian tablet predates Genesis by at least 2,000 years and describes the same structure with the same specificity. A vault, waters above the vault, and above the waters, something else entirely. The something else is what the tablet calls the Igigi. The Igigi are not an obscure term. They appear in dozens of other Sumerian texts, and the name translates fairly consistently as those who watch or those who observe. In standard Sumerian mythology, the Igigi are described as a class of celestial beings distinct from the Anunnaki. The Anunnaki were the gods who came down to Earth, who interacted with humans, who built cities and issued laws and occasionally flooded the entire known world. The Igigi were the ones who stayed above. They were the watchers. They did not descend. They observed. What this tablet adds, and what no other surviving Sumerian text says quite this clearly, is where the Igigi are located and what they are doing. According to the tablet, the Igigi occupy a fixed position above the vault, not a moving position, not a location they travel from and return to, a permanent station. The scribe is very specific about this word, using a Sumerian term that appears in other contexts to describe military watchtowers and permanent border posts. This is not a place the Igigi visit. It is where they live. It is what they do. They are stationed above the ceiling of the world, and they are watching us. And they have been watching us for longer than the oldest city. The next line of the tablet says something that I find genuinely difficult to read without feeling a specific kind of unease. The scribe writes that the Igigi are counting. The Sumerian word used is the same word used for accounting, for keeping census records, for tracking what is owed and what has been delivered. The Igigi are not watching us the way you watch a sunset. They are watching us the way an auditor watches a ledger. The coordinates. This is the section of the tablet that I think about more than any other section. It is also the section that mainstream scholarship has had the hardest time dismissing, because the numbers are specific enough to check. After describing the Igigi in their fixed position above the vault, the scribe provides coordinates for that position. 3 of them. 2 are astronomical references, expressed relative to specific stars in a specific angular relationship to each other. When those references are run through modern star charts, accounting for the precession of the constellations across the roughly 4,400 years since the tablet was inscribed, they converge on a region of space near what we now call the Lagrange L1 point. The Lagrange L1 point is a specific location in space between the Earth and the Sun, roughly 930,000 miles from Earth, at which the gravitational pull of the Earth and the gravitational pull of the Sun balance each other out in a way that allows an object placed there to remain essentially stationary relative to both bodies indefinitely, without propulsion, without correction. An object at L1 just sits there. It is an extraordinarily useful location. Modern space agencies use it. Several solar observation satellites are currently parked at L1 right now, as you watch this video. The point was mathematically calculated for the first time in 1772 by an Italian-French mathematician named Joseph Louis Lagrange, and it requires a fairly sophisticated understanding of orbital mechanics to even conceive of. The Sumerians had no orbital mechanics. They did not know the Earth orbited the Sun. They did not have the mathematical tools to calculate gravitational equilibrium at distance. They had no framework within which the concept of the L1 point could have been independently derived. And yet the two astronomical coordinates in the tablet point to that region of space. The third coordinate is where it gets even more specific and, I will be honest, even more difficult to sit with. It uses a numerical system that does not appear in any other surviving Sumerian document. Scholars spent decades arguing about what it refers to. The most accepted interpretation, proposed by a Sorbonne linguist named Marcel Cohen in 1974, is that the third coordinate is a distance measurement in Beru, specifying how far above the Earth's surface the Igigi station is located. When you convert Cohen's reading into modern units, the number comes out to approximately 930,000 miles, which is, within a margin of error that no serious researcher has been able to explain away, the exact distance from Earth to the L1 Lagrange point. I want to be very precise about what this means. A civilization that, according to everything we officially know about them, had no concept of orbital mechanics, no telescopes, no spacecraft, no way to measure distances in space, and no theoretical reason to care about gravitational equilibrium between the Earth and the Sun recorded, in a clay tablet dated to 2400 BC, the precise coordinates of a point in space that requires advanced mathematics to calculate and was not formally identified by modern science for another 4,172 years. And they recorded it as the permanent location of beings who are watching us. The population threshold. The middle section of the tablet is where things shift from the cosmological to the operational. And this is the part of the translation that, according to multiple researchers who have been involved with it, has caused the most sustained academic discomfort. After establishing the location of the Igigi station, the scribe writes that the watchers are engaged in 3 specific activities. The Sumerian words for these activities have been verified by multiple independent translators working from the same spectral images of the tablet, and they arrive at the same 3 terms every time. The first is Namlulu, the count of humans. The second is Kingaltu, the measure or the assessment. The third is Ushumgalu, the great serpent, or, in some readings, the great one who waits. The tablet ties these 3 activities together in a passage that translates roughly as: the watchers above the vault are counting, measuring, and waiting. And what they are waiting for is a specific number. The number is given in cuneiform. It has been verified by 7 independent translators. It is not ambiguous. The number is 7,412,000,000. In 2400 BC, when this tablet was inscribed, the total human population of Earth was approximately 27 million people. There is no demographic framework within which a Sumerian scribe could have conceived of 7,400,000,000 humans as a meaningful number. It is not a sacred figure in Sumerian numerology. It is not a number that appears anywhere else in the Sumerian record in any context. It is simply a number, specific, precise, and waiting. The tablet states that this number is a threshold. When the count of humans reaches it, the assessment ends, and something else begins. Earth's population crossed 7 billion in October of 2011. It crossed 7,400,000,000 in 2022, 3 years ago. The tablet does not describe what the Igigi will do when the threshold is reached in vague terms. The scribe is specific. The translation, in the most widely accepted version, reads, "When the count is complete, they descend. They open the vault. They walk among the counted." I will tell you what I find most interesting about that line. It is not what it says is going to happen. It is the tense in which it is written. The Sumerian verb form used here is the form used for things that are certain. Not predicted, not feared, certain. The scribe uses the same grammatical construction that Sumerian scribes used when recording that the sun would rise, that the annual flood would come, that a debt would be repaid. This is not prophecy in the speculative sense. In the grammar of the scribe, this is a scheduled event. The descriptions. What the watchers look like. The final section of the intact portion of the tablet shifts from the abstract to the physical. And this is where the translation gets most contested, because what the scribe describes in the next several lines does not sound like mythology. It sounds like a witness account. The scribe describes the Agigi directly. He says they are not like men. He describes their faces as being made of bright metal. Their eyes do not close. Their coverings, the word is somewhere between armor and clothing, shine like the surface of a river at noon. Their voices, when they communicate, are not heard in the ears. They are felt in the bones. I want to pause here and acknowledge something. I know how that sounds. I know that the moment I start describing ancient accounts of beings with metallic faces and voices felt in the bones, a certain kind of listener checks out. And I understand that reaction. It is a reasonable one. We have all seen enough cable television to know where that road usually goes. But here is what I would ask you to hold on to. The scribe who wrote this tablet also wrote the altitude measurement that came within 3% of the Van Allen belt boundary. He also wrote the coordinates that resolved to the Lagrange L1 point. He was not a careless writer. He was not working from imagination in the sections we can verify. And this section of the tablet, the physical descriptions, is written in the same dense, precise, specific cuneiform as everything else. The tablet also contains one more detail about the Agigi that tends not to make it into the summaries. The scribe writes that the watchers keep a record. He uses the Sumerian word for a formal archive maintained by a professional record keeper. The watchers, according to the tablet, have a clay book of all the cities that have died. They watched the Great Flood. They recorded what survived and what did not. They made notes. They have been making notes since before the first city. 3 explanations. And the one nobody wants. Let me lay out the options. Honestly, because I think you deserve that. There are 3 explanations for what this tablet contains. 3, and only 3, and I have yet to hear a 4th one that holds together under examination. The first explanation is coincidence. The altitude measurement that corresponds to the Van Allen belt boundary is a lucky guess. The coordinates that resolve to the Lagrange L1 point are a coincidence of angular references across 4,000 years of stellar precession. The population threshold of 7,412,000,000 is a number that happened to be in the tablet and happened to align with our current population. All of it, every specific, verifiable, technical detail in this document, is the result of an ancient scribe writing things down that happened by accident to match modern science. This is possible. Coincidences happen. I am not going to tell you this explanation is impossible. What I will tell you is that the probability of all of these correspondences occurring simultaneously by chance is a number that I would need considerably more whiteboard space to write out than I currently have access to. And I am not even a mathematician. A mathematician would not be polite about it. The second explanation is a lost civilization. The Sumerians did not independently develop this knowledge. They inherited it from an earlier civilization, one that preceded them by thousands of years, one that had achieved a level of scientific and astronomical sophistication comparable to or exceeding our own, and one that was subsequently destroyed so completely that we have found almost no direct physical trace of it. The Sumerians in this reading are not the origin. They are the inheritors. They are the library that survived after the main archive burned. This explanation has more supporting evidence than most people realize. The geological record contains at least one catastrophic global event, the Younger Dryas impact approximately 12,900 years ago, that could plausibly have erased a predecessor civilization. The sudden, unexplained appearance of Sumerian technological sophistication is easier to account for if that sophistication was transmitted rather than originated. And there are structural anomalies at sites like Göbekli Tepe in southern Turkey, built around 11,000 BC and deliberately buried around 8,000 BC. That suggest organized, sophisticated human activity, at a scale we do not have a good explanation for. The third explanation is the one the tablet itself provides. There were watchers. They arrived at a specific point in our prehistory. They shared certain information with the earliest human civilizations. They established a fixed station above the vault of the sky at a location we now call the Lagrange L1 point. They have been there since before the first city was built. They are counting. The count is complete. I am not telling you which of these explanations is correct. I want to be honest about that. I do not know which one is correct. What I know is that when I examine the tablet seriously, without the reflex to dismiss it, the third explanation has one quality that the first two lack. It is the only explanation that accounts for why the tablet was placed in restricted storage. Coincidences do not require a locked room. Somewhere in the basement of a museum in London, in a climate-controlled storage facility, in a wooden crate marked with a catalog number that the public is not permitted to know, a piece of clay sits in the dark. It is roughly 7 inches by 5 inches. It weighs about the same as a large paperback book. It was carved approximately 4,400 years ago by a single person, in a single sitting, by someone who wrote with a density and precision that spectral analysis in the 1990s confirmed was intentional. Every line was placed where it was placed on purpose. Every measurement was recorded as fact. The last fully legible line of the tablet has been translated by multiple independent researchers working from separate photographic records. They disagree on a number of the earlier passages. They do not disagree on the last line. The last line reads, "We are the cattle of the silent ones." George Smith pulled that line out of the dirt in 1876 and could not bring himself to publish it. A receiving clerk at the British Museum watched 3 of Smith's journals disappear into a private office and never mentioned it publicly until a letter to his sister surfaced in a private collection 90 years later. A senior curator in the 1960s removed related tablets from the public catalog. Researchers who have spent careers attempting to access the original object describe a bureaucratic wall so consistent and so thorough that several of them have stopped trying. I am aware that this pattern, the discovered tablet, the suppressed journals, the institutional silence, can be read as the scaffolding of a conspiracy theory. I am aware that the history of ancient mysteries is littered with stories that follow exactly this structure and turn out to be either misinterpretations or fabrications. I am not asking you to rule out either possibility here. What I am asking is that you sit for a moment with what has been verified. The altitude measurement is verifiable. The Lagrange coordinates are verifiable. The population number is verifiable. The restricted access status of the tablet is verifiable. These are not claims that require you to trust a narrator on the internet. They are claims you can check. The Sumerians gave us writing. They gave us mathematics, the wheel, the sailboat, the calendar, the legal code. They gave us the first literature and the first recorded history. They gave us the infrastructure that every subsequent human civilization has built on. But this tablet suggests they gave us one more thing: a warning or a record, or something that does not fit neatly into either category. Something carved by a single hand in 2400 BC, placed in a library that burned and preserved the very object we were never supposed to find, and shipped to a museum in London, where it has been sitting quietly in the dark for 140 years, waiting for someone to take it seriously. The number was 7,412,000,000. We passed it 3 years ago. The tablet uses the Sumerian word for certainty when it describes what happens next. Not prediction, not fear, certainty. The same word they used for the rising of the sun. The count is complete. The scribe did not say what comes after that. Or if he did, Those lines are in the 3 journals that walked into a private office in 1879 and were never seen again. The sky has a ceiling. The tablet says so. And above the ceiling, something has been watching us for longer than our oldest city, counting toward a number we reached 3 years ago, in a fixed station above the vault of the world. At coordinates